Hello everybody, welcome to Record of Ragnatalk, the podcast all about the anime and manga Record of Ragnarok. Today I wanted to dive into one of my personal favorite aspects about the manga, and that is the historical aspect. Now, I know Record of Ragnarok is not a completely historically accurate manga. I know Qin Shi Huang never existed in Qin's life. I know that Raiden Tameemon was not born with muscles so strong that it nearly killed him, and Jack the Ripper is far from a fucking gentleman. But I wanted to take this time to sort of compare what every human fighter has in common. Whether in reality or in the manga, the one thing that every human combatant has in common is that they're all dead. Spoilers for non-manga readers and people who have not finished Season 2. I will be starting with Buddha, and then listing the humans from top to bottom in the order that they are listed on the roster. Out of respect for the languages and cultures, as well as my fascination with linguistics, I will be using pronunciation guides to initially say the name of the human fighter in the proper accent with the proper pronunciation, before switching to a Western pronunciation or shortened version of the name of the fighters. English is my first and only fluent language, and it is likely the same for many of my viewers. I have not taken Serbian, Chinese, Japanese, Finnish, or Russian classes, and I haven't taken a French class since the 5th grade, so I apologize now for any incorrect pronunciation. And I promise that I am in no attempt trying to purposely butcher or slander the languages of the respective fighters, nor insult their nations of origin. Siddhartha Gautama Shakyamuni, better known as the Buddha or the Awakened, was born in the Lumbini province of Nepal in the year 564 BC. He was born to King Suddhodama and Queen Mahamaya Devi. Sadly, only 7 days after he was born, his mother passed away, leaving his aunt, Prajapati, to take the role of his mother. A mystic told Buddha's father that the prince would either become a king or a Buddha, also known as an enlightened teacher. Little did anyone know at the time that not only would he become a Buddha, but he would become the Buddha. His father, of course wanting an heir, gave the prince the best life he could. The prince was trained in sports, art, science, even warfare. He was strong and educated, but he was also isolated. The ideas of suffering and poverty were non-existent to him. The king allowed the now 29-year-old adult prince to leave the palace gates on chariot rides. On these rides, Buddha famously encountered an old man, a sick man, a dead man, and an ascetic monk. The monk, despite his awful conditions, was happy. Buddha wanted to understand, so one night, he secretly fled the palace, leaving his perfect life behind in order to find answers. The Buddha talked to many different people and faced many different struggles, until ultimately finding enlightenment while sitting under a Bodhi tree. At the age of 35 until his death, the now Buddha spread Buddhism as far and wide as he could. In the month of May on the year 543 BC, Buddha passed away after eating a tainted piece of either mushroom or pork. It is said that his last words were as follows: "Behold, O monks, this is my last advice to you. All component things in the world are changeable. They are not lasting. Work hard to gain your own salvation." Qin Shi Huang. Born to mother Zhao Ji and father King Zhuangjiang of Qin, Qin was the first emperor of a unified China. The name Qin Shi Huang actually isn't a name at all, it's a title. His real name is Ying Zhang. Ying Zhang was born during the Warring States period, a very important period within Chinese history where China was divided within 7 dynasties. The Qi dynasty, the Han dynasty, the Wei dynasty, the Zhao dynasty, the Yan dynasty, the Qi dynasty, and of course, the Qin dynasty. After the death of his father and becoming the king of the Qin dynasty, a 13-year-old Ying Zhang had a goal. That goal would soon become reality. Under his leadership, the Qin dynasty would conquer every other dynasty in China, putting an end to the Warring States period, and not making him Ying Zhang, king of the Qin dynasty, but making him Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor of China. But his ambition didn't end there. He ordered the construction of the Terracotta Army, an army to protect him in the afterlife, as well as the Great Wall of China. Qin was in fact so ambitious that he wanted to live forever. In an attempt to find the elixir of life, Qin would continuously drink mercury. At the time, mercury was believed to be a wonder medicine, curing all sorts of ailments. Ironically, it ended up killing Qin. He was born February 18th, 259 BCE, and died in the year 210 BCE. King Leonidas. Better known as King Leonidas in the West, Leonidas was born in Sparta, a city-state within ancient Greece. Claiming the throne in 489 BC, Leonidas was 17th in the Aegean line, and was said to be a descendant of the demigod Heracles. Although every Spartan to breathe air was tough, what sets Leonidas apart from all others is the Battle of Thermopylae. Although technically a Persian victory, the last stand committed by King Leonidas and the 300 Spartans is legendary, talked about thousands of years later. Aware of a Persian attack, Leonidas led an army of around 7,000 men to protect Thermopylae. However, their position was put at risk when a traitor informed the Persians of an existing path that went behind Greek lines. And a flank by the Persian army was the last thing they wanted. So with 300 Spartans, 900 Helots, 400 Thebians, and 700 Thespians, Leonidas guarded the path with his life, minus the 400 Thebians who surrendered to Xerxes. The Greeks knew this was a suicide mission. They knew that the Persian army had tens of thousands more soldiers than them. This was about buying time. The citizens of Thesby needed time to retreat, and with the 3 days the Spartans fought, the entire city was evacuated before the Persians could get there. When the Persians found King Leonidas' body, under orders of Xerxes I, it was decapitated and crucified. It took 40 years before the bones were returned to Sparta, where they were buried with full honor. In order to honor the efforts of King Leonidas, a stone statue of a lion was built in Thermopylae. His date of death is September 19, 480 BCE. Nikola Tesla, better known as Nikola Tesla in the West, was born July 10, 1856 in Smiljan, Croatia. As he was born during a thunderstorm, some said it was a bad omen, but his mother disagreed, stating that Nikola Tesla was a, quote, child of light. His mother, Georgina, was actually an inventor and created little trinkets around the house. His father, Milutin, was an Orthodox minister. Nikola attended the Higher Real Gymnasium, where he was accused of cheating due to his photographic memory and ability to do calculus in his head. Not surprising that he graduated a year early. In a physics class, Nikola Tesla was introduced to electricity, and he never looked back. After dodging death from cholera, Nikola Tesla dodged the Hungarian draft. In 1875, he joined the Imperial Royal Technical College in Graz on, ironically, a military frontier scholarship. Although in his first year he achieved the highest grades possible, his second and third year didn't go so well. He ultimately left Graz without graduating in 1878. What went wrong? Well, he was overstressed from working himself too much on the very first year, and fell into gambling and womanizing, losing all of his tuition money. Though his luck would turn back around when in 1881 he was employed by a telegraph company in Budapest. His improvements to the company got him the position of chief electrician. In 1882, Nikola Tesla got a job in Paris. He did so good that when his manager moved to the United States to manage Edison Machine Works, he asked Nikola Tesla to come along. And in 1884, Nikola Tesla immigrated. Although he only lasted 6 months at the company due to the disagreements with Thomas Edison, one of the major being that Nikola Tesla preferred alternate currents to direct currents. And Thomas Edison mostly cared about lining his pockets, while Nikola Tesla cared more about the advancements of science. Thomas Edison also screwed Nikola Tesla out of $50,000, over $1.5 million today. Employees were told they would receive a bonus if they designed 2 machines. Nikola Tesla designed the machines, and then was told that the bonus was just a joke. Nikola Tesla wanted to start his own business using alternating currents, though he had no money. He had to work various electrical repair jobs and work as a ditch digger for $2 a day. Nikola Tesla talked about his struggles in the year of 1886, writing, "My high education in various branches of science, mechanics, and literature seemed to me like a mockery." Though later on in 1864, Nikola Tesla finally got some investors who were worth his time. They came up with an agreement, and Nikola Tesla founded the Tesla Electric Lighting and Manufacturing Company. In 1887, Nikola Tesla designed an induction motor that ran on alternating currents. Then, Nikola Tesla's investors, a Western Union superintendent named Alfred S. Brown, and a New York attorney named Charles Fletcher Peck, got to work doing the one thing Nikola Tesla couldn't do, and that was market the product. In July of 1888, Brown and Peck negotiated with George Westinghouse. Tesla's motor and transformer designs were sold for $60,000 in cash and stock, with a royalty for each horsepower produced by each motor. Then Tesla started working for Westinghouse for a year, making around $60,000 per month. In the same year Nikola Tesla became a citizen of the United States, he patented his most iconic invention, the Tesla coil. In 1895, Nikola Tesla had a lab fire that unfortunately set back much of his progress. In 1896, Nikola Tesla began to experiment with X-rays. In 1898, Tesla showed that he could remotely control a boat using radio waves, and from the 1890s through 1906, Nikola Tesla experimented with wireless power. In 1906, things sadly took a turn for Tesla. Investor J.P. Morgan was very interested in wireless transmission and gave Nikola Tesla a $150,000 investment to accomplish it. However, Italian inventor Guglielmo Marconi invented it first. J.P. Morgan pulled out of the investment, putting Nikola Tesla in debt. Nikola Tesla continued to invent for the rest of his life, although he never saw the success that he did when he was younger. Nikola Tesla died of heart failure on January 7, 1943. His body was found by a hotel maid. Nikola Tesla never married and never had children. The closest thing to a romantic relationship he had was to pigeons. Nikola Tesla was quoted as saying, "I've been feeding pigeons, thousands of them, for years, but there was one, a beautiful bird, pure white with light gray tips on its wings. That one was different. It was female. I had only to wish and call her, and she would come flying to me. I loved that pigeon as a man loves a woman, and she loved me. As long as I had her, there was a purpose to my life." Kojirō Sasaki, the demon of the western provinces, was born in Fukui Prefecture in 1575. As an adult, Kojirō Sasaki stood at 5 foot 10 inches tall. He was trained by Todo Saigen, blind master of the Chujo Ryu style of sword fighting. Kojirō would develop his own fighting style and use a sword known as an odaichi, a sword longer than a katana. This sword was only used by the strongest and most skilled fighters. Kojirō definitely fit within those categories. Kojirō would engage in many different fights, learning and observing different styles. Eventually, he defeated his master's brother in a duel. It was at that moment that Kojirō knew he had to move on. Kojirō wanted to perfect his fighting style, so he observed nature, meditated, and tried to see just how he could implement it within his style. Observing a bird in flight, Kojirō developed the Tsubami Gaishi. Translated to the swallow blade, this mimicked the technique of a swallow's tail while flying. This technique, combined with Sasaki's strength and sword reach, killed nearly everybody it came in contact with. Sasaki was said to have defeated 3 armed opponents using a tessen, essentially a metal fan. Tessen jutsu was not meant to defeat opponents with swords. However, Sasaki's skill persevered. Sasaki's reputation spread, making him one of the most feared swordsmen in all of Japan. Sasaki continued to win duel after duel, killing many opponents. But his most famous duel was the one he lost, against legendary swordsman Musashi Miyamoto. Musashi Miyamoto's reputation spread as well. Sasaki Kojirō, wanting to face Musashi Miyamoto, asked Hosokawa Tadaroki, a famous samurai general, to set up a meeting between the two. Sasaki asked for this fight to be just between him and Musashi. At this point, Sasaki had many followers due to his reputation, but he didn't want his followers interfering with the match. On a remote island, Musashi showed up 3 hours late. The two men were equally matched, with Sasaki allegedly coming close to victory multiple times. But duels to the death must have a winner. And on April 13, 1612, Musashi Miyamoto killed Sasaki Kojirō. Jack the Ripper. The Jack the Ripper case is still officially unsolved, with dozens of suspects and dozens of theories. What we do know is that officially Jack the Ripper has 5 canonical victims and was active from the year 1888 to 1891 in Victorian London. Some say he's also responsible for the murder of 4 others in the Thames Torso murders, and some say he was responsible for the Battersea mystery, which took place a decade earlier. I can see arguments for and against all of this, but frankly, I don't know. The one thing we do know is that Jack the Ripper was a product killer. It wasn't the process of killing that he enjoyed. He killed his victims very quickly. It was the product of it. He wanted the dead body to mutilate and do all sorts of things with. This mystery will likely never be solved, and we will never truly know the identity of Jack the Ripper. And because of that, we're just going to move on. Adam. Adam's existence really depends on your religious beliefs. Whether you believe in him or not is completely up to you. The one and only source of his existence is the Bible, so that is what I will be using as my source. Born day 6 at 1 a.m. in the Garden of Eden, Adam was the first man created by God. Using the rib of Adam, God then made Eve. Adam and Eve had children: Cain, Abel, and certain Abrahamic religions believe Seth. God told them not to eat the apple from the tree of knowledge. But a serpent came around and convinced Eve to do so, which she did. Adam then followed suit and ate from the tree as well. God then passed judgment, making the serpent crawl around on its belly, which I guess it wasn't doing before. He punished Eve by making women have the pain of childbirth, and he punished Adam by making him work for all of his food. They were then kicked out of the Garden of Eden. Adam died at the age of 930. Raiden Tameemon. Born to parents Hanemon Seki and Ken Seki in January of 1767 in Tomi, Japan, Todokichi Seki was practically gifted a body for sumo wrestling. He was incredibly strong, and at the time where the average Japanese person was 5 feet tall, Todokichi towered over them at 6 feet 6 inches tall. Raiden's hands were massive too. Measuring from fingertip to wrist, Raiden's hands were over 9 inches long. With Todokichi's unique physique, it wasn't long before his father recommended that he join a sumo school. Raiden did, and proceeded to dominate absolutely everybody in his wake. Due to his explosive power, he was given the wrestling name Raiden Tameemon, the Thunderbolt. Debuting in November of 1790, Raiden had a record of 254 wins, 10 losses, and 41 draws. And that was with his limitations. Raiden Tameemon was good. In fact, too good. He was so good that in order to give his opponents a chance, he was banned from using certain moves, one of which was just picking up his opponent and dropping them. Even with this, he had a winning percentage of 96.2. That is the highest winning percentage of any sumo wrestler in all of history. When Raiden's parents passed away, out of respect, his home village built monuments honoring them, and Raiden himself donated a sake barrel made of stone in honor of his father. At some time during his life, Raiden married a woman by the name of Yae. In the spring of 1811, Raiden retired from sumo wrestling at the age of 43. He became chairman of a sumo association in what is modern-day Shimane Prefecture. In 1816, he moved to Edo and finished his diary, which documented his time as a sumo wrestler from the year 1789 to his retirement. He was buried in Edo, Japan when he passed. 2 locks of his hair were buried in other graves, one of which located in his home village, and another in Shimane Prefecture. Okita Sōji. Born Okita Sōji Fujiwara no Kanayoshi in Edo, Japan in either the year 1842 or the year 1844, Okita is considered one of the best swordsmen in the Shinsengumi. I couldn't find any information about his mother, but his father is a man by the name of Okita Katsujiro. He had 2 sisters, Okita Mitsu and Okita Kin. Okita's sister Mitsu got married to a man by the name of Rintaro, who became his adopted brother. Although an expert at the bokken, bow staff, and sword, he wasn't very particularly good with the shinai. His signature technique was the sandansuki, a technique that could attack somebody's neck, left shoulder, and right shoulder with one strike. Okita joined the Roshigumi and headed to Kyoto on March 26, 1863. However, when they arrived on April 10, 1863, the Roshigumi was disbanded. Okita and several founding members of the Roshigumi decided to stay behind in Mibu, Kyoto to form the Mibu Roshigumi. The Mibu Roshigumi would then become the Shinsengumi. In 1865, Okita became a captain of the first unit of the Shinsengumi and served as a Kenjutsu instructor. During the Bosnian War, Okita went into a hospital in Edo owned by Matsumoto Ryujun, who was a famed physician at the time. Okita had tuberculosis, and it was taking its toll on him. While the rest of the Shinsengumi retreated to the Tohoku region, Okita was forced to stay in Edo alone due to his sickness. He died on July 19, 1868 at just the age of 25 in Edo, Japan. Grigori Rasputin. Grigori Yefimovich Rasputin was born in Pokrovskoye, Russia on January 21, 1869. Yefim Rasputin, Grigori Rasputin's father, was a typical Serbian peasant. His mother, Anna Pashakova, had 7 children before Rasputin, but they all died during infancy. As a child, Grigori was said to have seen angels, visions of the future, and was capable of healing animals just by touching them. In his late teens and early 20s, Rasputin was a troublemaker, until ultimately, at the age of 24, he got married. Rasputin and his wife, Praskovia Dubrovina, had 3 children, Maria Rasputin, Dmitry Rasputin, and Varvara Rasputin. Though it wasn't exactly getting married that caused him to change his ways, he was still a violent alcoholic and still cheated on his wife. One day, Rasputin stole a horse. He rode that horse to a Christian sanctuary where he would sort of lay low until the whole horse thief thing blew over. While there, he had learned to find God and abandon his evil ways. Rasputin decided to become a monk and abandoned his family so he could travel around spreading the word of Christ. It wasn't long before Rasputin came across a cult called the Christies. A Rasputin would watch the Christies strangle each other, getting high off the feeling of asphyxiation, spinning in circles and dancing until they felt drunk, falling to the floor, and culminating the night in a giant orgy. Rasputin continued to travel, not shaving, not bathing, and ultimately wearing painful shackles to make up for his past sins. By the time he returned to his family, he was a completely different person. Well, that was until he used his wife's basement to have gigantic orgies. Rasputin claimed that the Virgin Mary had spoken to him, and that he needed to travel to St. Petersburg in order to serve the royal family. One of his pals from the monastery actually used to be the religious advisor for the Romanovs. Rasputin used this connection to make contact with royals and fascinate them with his supposed mystic powers. Ultimately, he met a bishop and a high-level priest who thought he was insane. He smelled terrible and had crazy-looking eyes. But they were soon convinced that he was gifted by God when they witnessed his healing abilities. Around this time, Tsarina Alexandra Romanov had lost her previous spiritual advisor. On his deathbed, he stated that Tsarina would find a new spiritual advisor very soon. She then met Rasputin. She had heard of Rasputin's healing abilities, and her son Alexei was a hemophiliac. She had asked Rasputin to heal her son, and surprisingly, he somewhat did. Alexei's hemophilia was somewhat of an open secret. Although Rasputin was not told about it, he likely learned about it through gossip. One day, Alexei had hurt himself, and the bleeding would not stop. Rasputin showed up to the palace gates and said he had a vision that if he did not help Alexei, Alexei would die. Rasputin asked to be left alone with Alexei, and when he was, the healing stopped. On that day forward, Rasputin was in good graces with the Romanov family. Rasputin had an apartment in St. Petersburg. Women would show up and have potlucks, bringing him nice food and, well, thinking he was the second coming of Christ, sleep with him. Rasputin's claims and boistering got more and more outlandish. The Romanovs knew Rasputin was somewhat crazy and had a horrible reputation. However, they thought that his mystic healing abilities were necessary for Alexei to stay alive, so they kept him around. Rasputin's reputation was so intense that his former colleagues thought he was the Antichrist. One of them went as far as to hire a former prostitute to assassinate him. She stabbed Rasputin multiple times in the stomach, using her hands to rip out his intestines for good measure. As if things couldn't get any worse, on this day, Archduke Ferdinand was assassinated, and Europe was preparing for war. Rasputin could not advise the Tsar due to him healing in a hospital. Rasputin begged the Tsar not to go to war, seeing it as the end of the Tsars and himself. However, the Tsar did not listen. The Tsar went off to fight in the war, and Rasputin became the Tsarina's advisor. The war was a disaster. Thousands of Russians died, the Russian economy tanked, and to add insult to injury, everybody saw the Tsarina running around with a crazy, orgy-having, dirty monk. The people of Russia had enough of the Romanovs, and they had enough of Rasputin. Rasputin fell ill. He knew his time was coming, and he saw this moment as his Christ moment, thinking that God was sacrificing him in order to save the Russian people. Rasputin wrote to the Tsarina, saying that if because of her he died, that nobody in her family would survive another 2 years. In comes Prince Felix Yosipov, nephew of the Tsarina. Felix told Rasputin that his wife had a sex addiction that she needed healing from. When Felix met up with Rasputin, he fed Rasputin poisoned food, more than enough to kill him, and Rasputin did not die. Rasputin over time had built an immunity to poison by having very, very small doses of it over time. When that didn't work, Felix left the room, got a gun, returned, and shot Rasputin in the chest. When looking over what he thought was the dead body, Rasputin sprung back to life and attacked the prince. Rasputin escaped into the courtyard until he was caught and shot point blank in the head by the prince. The men the prince had accompanied himself with for this assassination pulled up their revolvers and continued to fill Rasputin with holes. They stuffed Rasputin into a trunk, drove to an icy river, and threw him underneath the ice. When they found Rasputin's body, his hands were facing up, as if he was pressing up against the ice of the river. Whether it was the bullets, the poison, the ice, or all of it, Rasputin was assassinated on December 30th, 1916. And eerily, Rasputin's prediction came true. Every member of the Romanov family, within 2 years, was dead. Michel de Nostradamus. Born in Saint-Rémy-de-Provence in France on December 14th of 1503, his father was Jaime de Nostradamus and his mother was Renier de Saint-Rémy. Nostradamus was a particularly intelligent child, with his grandparents taking notice and teaching him how to read and write Latin, Greek, and Hebrew, as well as teaching him the basics of mathematics. Nostradamus was not the original family name. His relatives were Jewish and, due to the Inquisition, changed it to avoid persecution. Therefore, Nostradamus was taught ancient Jewish tradition as well as astrology. This fascinated the young Nostradamus. The ideas that stars could intertwine with fate was something that he latched onto. At just the age of 14, Nostradamus studied medicine at the University of Avignon. The bubonic plague ultimately cut his education short, but it introduced Nostradamus to the deadly disease. Nostradamus traveled the French countryside, studying herbs and doing his best with his knowledge of medicine to try and treat the plague. At the age of 19 in 1522, Nostradamus decided to pursue his education further. He enrolled in the University of Montpellier, although it didn't last long for him. Nostradamus often clashed with the many Catholic teachers who saw astrology as blasphemous. Nostradamus' expulsion, however, was the result of his previous work treating medicine. It was seen as a manual labor, therefore not dignified enough for the university. In the year 1525, Michel de Nostradam changed his last name to the Latin Nostradamus. Nostradamus, despite being kicked out of university, continued to work in the medical field. He developed a, quote, rose pill that was decently effective against the plague, which earned him quite the reputation. In 1531, Nostradamus was invited to Agen, France. There, he married a woman possibly named Henriette d'Ancus and had 2 children. However, his wife and 2 children would be killed by the plague. Being a doctor that treated the plague, this ruined his reputation. He then continued to travel throughout France and possibly to Italy. Shunned by the medical field, Nostradamus began putting his efforts into the occult and astrology. Nostradamus began to have visions. While in Italy, Nostradamus immediately knelt down in front of a friar that he found named Felici. That friar would go on to become Pope. He traveled to Greece, Turkey, absorbing as much occult knowledge as he could. He then returned to France and married a wealthy widow. Him and his wife Anne Ponsard proceeded to have 6 children. It was around this time that he started his famous predictions. In front of either a mirror or a bowl of water full of herbs, he would meditate for hours, getting visions and interpreting those visions into predictions. In 1550, Nostradamus wrote down several of his visions and sold them in an almanac. It performed well, and this encouraged Nostradamus to continue his prophecies. In the year 1555, Nostradamus would publish his most well-known work, predictions for centuries to come in the form of 4-line poems. The list of Nostradamus' predictions are endless, and I have already spent all day researching and recording for this video, so I will not be listing them here. You're free to research them yourself. Later in life, Nostradamus would develop a severe form of gout, which is an inflammatory arthritis. In June of 1566, Nostradamus had a lawyer write down his will and testament for his wife and children. On July 1st of 1566, Nostradamus predicted to his secretary that, quote, "You will not find me alive at sunrise." Like many of his future predictions, Nostradamus turned out to be right, and on either the 1st or 2nd of July 1566, Nostradamus passed away. Li Bu. Li Bu, better known as Lu Bu, doesn't even have an estimated birth year, let alone a birth day. However, we do know he was born near the modern city of Baotao in Inner Mongolia. Similar to Raiden, at an early age, Lu Bu was tall, athletic, and possessed incredible strength. He was a master archer, horseback rider, and was able to wield practically any weapon at the time efficiently. While in Bing province, a warlord by the name of Ding Yun saw Lu Bu's efficiency and adopted him. The death of Emperor Ling of Han on May 13, 189 AD set up a domino effect. Long story short, warlord Dong Zhou convinced Lu Bu to turn on his master, Ding Yun. Lu Bu decapitated Ding Yun and presented his head to his new leader. Lu Bu was given the position of cavalry commander, but was quickly promoted to general. Dong Zhou had overthrown Ling's predecessor and replaced him with Emperor Zhang of Han. Emperor Zhang was really just a puppet, and it was Dong Zhou who was pulling the strings. Many warlords banded together to try to take down Dong Zhou, leaving Lu Bu plenty of armies to fight. But even for Lu Bu and his army, this was too much, and Dong Zhou made the decision to retreat from the capital city. The capital was burnt to the ground, but thankfully for Lu Bu and Dong Zhou, their enemies did not follow them as they retreated west. Dong Zhou assigned Lu Bu to be his personal bodyguard. However, Dong Zhou thought that Lu Bu was not giving him the respect he deserved, and in anger, threw axe daggers at Lu Bu. Lu Bu managed to get out unscathed, but grew to hate Dong Zhou. Lu Bu soon learned of an assassination plot within the Han Dynasty to take down Dong Zhou, and Lu Bu was the one who delivered the fatal blow. On May 22, 192 AD, Lu Bu killed Dong Zhou. Following this, Lu Bu became the highest-ranking man in all of ancient China. Zhao's followers were understandably upset about his assassination and formed an army to take down the new capital city. When the leader of the army went to the north gate of the capital, he found Lu Bu standing alone. Lu Bu did not want to send his men out, and he challenged the leader to a one-on-one duel. Lu Bu injured him, winning the fight. However, the general was a sore loser and decided to send all of his men after Lu Bu, forcing him to retreat. Due to his immense strength and speed, Lu Bu was nicknamed the Flying General. Lu Bu settled in the north and became friends with warlord Luang Zhao. After another successful battle, Lu Bu got arrogant. He even began to send soldiers to raid the land of the new warlord that he served. The new warlord decided Lu Bu had to die. Soldiers went to Lu Bu's tent and killed the man sleeping inside. The man sleeping inside was not Lu Bu. Once again, Lu Bu had escaped. Lu Bu then joined another warlord by the name of Zhang Yang. The previous warlord tried to send soldiers after Lu Bu when he found out he was alive, but the soldiers were too scared of Lu Bu and refused to fight him. One of Zhang Zhao's old friends tried to pay the new warlord to kill Lu Bu. Lu Bu told the new warlord that if he died, that the new warlord would only get weaker, but if Lu Bu worked for him, he would only get stronger. The new warlord double-crossed Zhang Zhao's old ally, and rather than kill Lu Bu, gave him refuge. Lu Bu managed to seize control of the city Paoyang. He then declared himself governor of the entire Yang province. Many joined Lu Bu, but many stayed loyal to the warlord Cao Cao. Lu Bu and Cao Cao's army clashed, and neither would give way. Due to lack of food and droughts, the fight could not continue. Lu Bu was forced to retreat, and Cao Cao took back all of his land from the Yao province. Lu Bu once again went to a new warlord, Liu Bei. Liu Bei was understandably cautious. Then, a former enemy of Zhang Zhao got into contact with Lu Bu, and convinced Lu Bu to, of course, betray the warlord. Lu Bu captured Liu Bei's family and ordered his troops to set fire to the city. Lu Bu took Liu Bei's place and declared himself the governor. Luang Zhi and his army, Luang Zhi being the man who had convinced Lu Bu to turn on Liu Bei, met with Liu Bei and Liu Bei's army to fight. But Lu Bu prevented the battle. Lu Bu took his bow and arrow and declared that if he could make a shot and hit the lower part of the curved blade, Liu Bei's army would leave. If he couldn't make it in one shot, they could stay and fight. They agreed, and Lu Bu was said to be so far away from the blade that he could barely see it. Of course, Lu Bu hit it. Both armies withdrew. Everything seemed fine, but Cao Cao, old enemy of Lu Bu, was planning something. With Cao Cao and his army approaching, Lu Bu personally led his own army to counteract him. Lu Bu was defeated and was forced to retreat. Lu Bu decided to surrender. He ordered his men to take his head so that some of them may be spared. But Lu Bu's men refused. Lu Bu then, on his own, presented himself to Cao Cao, surrendering. Lu Bu tried to have his life spared by offering his allegiance to Cao Cao. Liu Bei reminded Cao Cao of his rather betraying reputation. Cao Cao didn't take Lu Bu up on his offer, and on February 7th, 199 AD, Lu Bu was hung. Simo Häyhä, born to Father Juho Maitinpoika Häyhä and Mother Katrina Johinta Vilko, little did the people of Rotjärvi, Finland know that on December 17, 1905, Finland's greatest soldier was born. As a child, Simo was a lot of things, but one thing he definitely wasn't was alone. 3 sisters, Maria, Katri, and Hilja, and 4 brothers, Matti, Antti, Thomas, and Johanna. Sadly, during his life, Simo would see his brother, Thomas, die of sunstroke, his brother Antti dying during the Finnish Civil War, and Johanna being injured during the same conflict. Simo got above average grades in school, however, he wasn't very interested in studying. He liked to stick to himself and work on his family's farm. When he wasn't working, he was busy with his hobbies of shooting, hunting, and skiing. Simo's home was allegedly full of trophies from his marksmanship competitions. Simo never wanted to take center stage during group photographs, always preferring to stay somewhat hidden in the back. However, due to his success, he was somewhat forced to take center stage. Simo started his military career in 1925 at Raivola Bicycle Battalion 2, where he served for 15 months. Simo got his sniper training at Udi in 1938. According to eyewitness accounts, Simo was able to accurately estimate distances from 1 meter to 150 meters. Simo also hit a target 16 times from 150 meters away. That is an average of hitting a target at 500 feet every 3.75 seconds. When the Winter War rolled around, Simo headed into battle with a Finnish-made M2830, essentially a Finnish variant of the Mosin Nagant, and the KP-31 submachine gun. Of the 105 days of the Winter War, Simo served 98, missing 7 because he was in a coma. More on that later. Simo, without using a scope, scored at least 500 kills during his time in the Winter War. That is more than any other sniper in history. Some estimate that he killed around 700 people if we were to include the kills from his submachine gun, but Simo personally didn't count those. Simo would bury himself in the snow, stuffing snow in his mouth in order to hide his breath. He survived dozens of artillery attacks and counter-sniped the counter-snipers who were sent to counter-snipe him. Though war is without question horrible, Simo was able to find joy in little things. Simo recounts the time where they had once captured a Soviet soldier. They blindfolded him, spun him around until he was dizzy, and then took him to Simo's lieutenant's tent to have a party. The Soviet soldier was said to have such a good time that he was disappointed when he was released. On March 6, 1940, Simo was severely injured when an explosive bullet hit him on his lower left jaw. His comrades thought he was dead, and they threw him onto a pile of dead bodies. It was only when one soldier saw Simo's leg twitch that they knew he was alive. The bullet had destroyed Simo's upper jaw, lower jaw, and most of his left cheek. Many people thought Simo had died. The information spread throughout Finland and the Soviet Union. Simo woke up a week after being shot, the same day that peace was declared. Simo was surprised to read about his death in the newspaper, and sent a polite letter to the newspaper letting them know that, in fact, he was still alive. Simo underwent 26 different surgeries and took 14 months to fully recover. When the Continuation War happened, Simo actually wanted to continue fighting. However, due to his injury, he was denied. Simo received many medals, including the 1st and 2nd class Medals of Liberty, as well as the 3rd and 4th class Crosses of Liberty. Simo kept a rather low profile after the war. Between 1946 and 1960, he lived on his brother's farm. In 1961, the Finnish government gifted Simo his very own farm. Simo preferred to live alone, although he did hunt and fish with several friends. Simo continued his hobby of hunting and took up dog breeding. It should come as no surprise that Simo succeeded in both of these endeavors. He received the Ruokolahti Hunting Society's Game Cup 5 times in a row between the years 1962 and 1966, and he also won awards for his time being an exceptional dog breeder. Simo also had a favorite hunting dog by the name of Kili. Simo continued to keep to himself. In the 1970s, he bought a 1-bedroom apartment and lived there until 2001. He then moved into a war veteran hospital in Himana. On April 1st, 2002, Simo passed away from old age. If Simo were alive today, he would be 118 years old, making him officially Record of Ragnarok's youngest participant. Sakata Kintoki. Okay, this is a little complicated because Sakata Kintoki was a real person. However, the backstory about him is very unique and filled with legends and folktales. I tried my best to stick with what was historically accurate, but there really wasn't a lot of information on the real Sakata Kintoki. There are multiple different stories involving Kintoki's childhood. One states that Kintoki was raised by Princess Yagiri near Mount Ishigata. Another states that Kintoki's mother took him into the woods in order to avoid the bickering between Kintoki's father and uncle. Another states that Kintoki's mother left him alone in the forest for him to die, only to be taken in and raised by a Yama-uba, or mountain witch. Another says that Kintoki's mother raised him but was called a Yama-uba due to her crazy appearance. And then another story claims that his mother really was a Yama-uba, not just called that, and she was impregnated by a clap of thunder sent by a red dragon on Mount Ishigata. Thankfully, the tales start to sort of tell the exact same story, so I won't have to constantly repeat the different tellings of said story. As a child, Kintaro was energetic, rowdy, and chubby. He didn't wear any clothes aside from a bib that had the kanji for gold on it. He also only owned a hatchet. He didn't get along with other kids, so he made friends with the animals in the forest. He became their protector. He was said to be incredibly strong, uprooting trees and smashing rocks into pieces. He cut down trees, he fought monsters and demons, and sumo wrestled a bear. As an adult, Kintaro changed his name from Kintaro to Sakata no Kintoki. It was then that he met the samurai Minamoto no Yorimitsu. Yorimitsu was so impressed by Kintoki's strength that he decided to take him as a personal retainer and live with him in Kyoto. Kintoki then went back, got his mom, and brought her to Kyoko with him. Kintoki is absolutely legendary in Japan. It is Japanese tradition to decorate the room of a baby boy with Kintaro dolls on Children's Day, May 5th. This is a special holiday that takes place on Japan's famous Golden Week. This is done in hopes that the boy will grow up to be nice and strong like the golden boy Kintaro. At the foot of Mount Ishigata, a shrine can be found dedicated to him. Nearby is a giant boulder, said to have been cut in half by Kintaro himself. And there is even Kintaro candy that has been around since the Edo period, which, no matter how you cut it, you can still see Kintaro's face inside the candy itself. You can actually see Kintoki give this to Buddha when he's first introduced in the manga, just a little detail that I enjoyed. Though information on the real Sakata Kintoki is scarce, I was able to find one source that stated that on January 17th in the year 1012, Sakata Kintoki got a serious fever and died at the age of 55 years old in Mimasaki province. A shrine was then built in honor of Kintoki called the Kurikata Jinja Shrine, which you can actually visit in Okayama. And that is every human listed on the roster's life and death. Thank you so much for listening.